think one of the first things we were that they
Somebody thought it would be a great idea. And they like thing out of the wall. And new charges.
so right now
Do you want to drink
such a pretty one of the new interns over there is Ada. She is, I don't know, she said she was in tour. She's also a student at YMCA. So I was like, I didn't want it down with you. Go for it. So once you get back to me, anything else, I mean, I don't feel anything like that. I think it's something from the
Yeah.
I thought it was to be here.
I got something in the mail, but it was, that meeting was that.
No. So if there's a third one, that's something
Yeah,
else.
but they are redoing that bridge, or something, then they.
Sometimes also if you ever.
From what I heard, I can't find the actual copy.
Your arms on the TV.
They're gonna actually put in like a walkway.
Grade separated, yeah.
Yeah, 2020. I got the thing.
And we're, like, just like, is that a step? Oh, yeah, expecting I have to. Oh, my goodness. We're like, yeah, that's what the litter. There's some way that you want to better your day. So it's like, oh. So this is great. Yeah.
You know, Arian. I was going to say, you live back close to Harvard, so you probably got her.
Yeah. Oh,
Yes, it's at the morning paper, and I write my life on the lane high, and going farther. I had a brother in ROTC at the time, and he's like the second last.
What's up?
Thank
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just haven't, and they, you know, what was it, and how they think.
Eagles can't.
Oh, as well as possible. For moms, we have some.
Our
District. As soon as I knew your house.
My
Yeah.
It's free. There are a lot of good stories, but nothing.
Dude, you're something.
Thankful. Thankful. Thankful.
Yeah.
we have another good subdivision.
It's 7 o'clock, so in respect for everybody's time, we'll get started as promptly as we can. My name is David Botero. I'd like to welcome you all to our September meeting of the Clintonville Area Commission. The agenda was circulated earlier, and I just asked, are there any exceptions or changes to the agenda, or can we approve the agenda? Okay, great. I'd like to move on with district updates and just ask all members maybe keep it as brief as possible. I'd like to begin over here with my far left with Commissioner Motil.
Thank you very much. Joe McHines, the Recreation and Parks has agreed to do some honeysuckle removal and add some new plantings near this area where there was a vernal pool. They detected the vernal pool and some other like standing water issues. And they're requesting the Fenway Pines Condominium Association for some volunteers. They may need contact flow for assistance as well. And they also, Tina has allowed them to make suggestions for plantings and things of that nature. Public Utilities is still working on plans to install a new stormwater outlet that's in a cul-de-sac where one is missing. Somehow they forgot to put one in, but they're still looking into those plans, and I think eventually it will be done. In terms of Della Wanda, Tina Moan, who's the Rex and Parks Natural Resource and Asset Manager, Bethany Fairman Kenny, and I met with Della Wanda Residents Association on our estate. Tina gave an updated report on the old Beachville Bikeway shared use path, and it appears that Rex and Parks is taking on a more of a lead in the design of the path. The two trees that were most likely going to be saved were going to be removed, they're going to be saved. The width of the path has not yet been decided. Most likely it will be 8 feet or less with a permeable surface, most likely, and the landscaping plan will be modified as well. Beth and I also went on a walk with Della Wanda President Rosie Quinzon Benea and the former Della Wanda President and longtime resident John Bennett, as many of you know. And we went to look at some traffic concerns and the need for some traffic calming in their neighborhood. And they felt that it was going to be caused due to the new TJ Maxx and the home goods store, along with the newer Graceland Apartments. Charles Newman, who's the public relations specialist with the Public Service Department, responded this past Tuesday with a detailed email in response to their concerns. So we're going to wait for Della Wanda to kind of digest what he had to say and see if they have any further responses in terms of his comments. The CODA Chief Engineer and Mechanical Officer, Andy Bittersville, I believe it's pronounced, he continues to remain silent on my request to have a meeting with Della Wanda regarding the vacant lot. In terms of Aldridge Road, I've received quite a few emails complaining about parking since school has started. Thus, residents have been inquiring about when the signs will go up. I've been told by Public Service that they should be installed in about 3 weeks. So that's it. Thank you.
Hugh Kroll, District 4. It's been very quiet, and I have no update.
Libby Weatherholt, District 3. Between David and myself, we've been trying to find out a little bit more about Blueprint, because we were told earlier that the 60% meeting, or they'd be receiving input through August, and then the 60% meeting would happen this fall. But they hadn't gotten a letter back to us that they designed based on the letters we wanted to send out. And I don't know, did you get anything yet, David? Did you get something? Okay.
I made a comment.
Okay,
About
well,
the letter.
I promised that I would be sending a letter out about 2.5 months ago, but then Blueprint asked me to send my letter to them so they could work with it, and then, that I basically said it was fine, and then I don't know, it kind of got lost. So anyhow, we're working on that. I had an email from some homeowners. It's the eastmost house on East Weber Road before the railroad tracks. And about 4 years ago, maybe, that house had sold to a flipper, and they decided they were going to fence the entire yard. And this house they have more yard on the other side of the alleyway, as many of the houses there right at the end of those streets do. And many people use that alleyway to get all the way through to Weber. To prevent criminals from making fast exits out onto Weber. At least that was what the paper reported years ago. And here, and I have a yard here, so why don't you just give me the alleyway? And that's what happened. And with zoning and variance, they only had to contact 2 homeowners, nobody else, sorry. Because I would like to walk toward her house, but then I have to go through. Anyhow, but it's not just me. Anyhow, these knew that this is a problem, and they are going to go ahead and fence in the yard, but they would like to leave some space so that people can walk around it. And they're just asking for, as well as some people who have contacts with Boy Scouts and things like that. I do not yet have anything from anybody. This just happened this week, really. But if you know anybody who might be interested in even, this is a really great way for the neighborhood to come together and for these neighbors to contribute something to the neighborhood that they really had nothing to do with. So that's what's happening. Then my husband and I were involved in a heat mapping project through Columbus. There were 20-some routes that people did 3 times a day. This was back mid-August. And it was pretty interesting, data and everything. David Celebrezzi is hoping that all of the data got recorded. Many people had some problems with some of the instruments, and my husband and I, in fact, did on both of our times. So we'll see, but I think it was a very interesting project for patterns throughout the city. I think there's a handout about the affordable housing. Anyhow, that's September 17th with Michael Stinciano doing that. In District 3, they have evidence of the West Nile virus, and so on Tuesday morning from 3 to 7 Labor Day, they will be doing some spraying in District 3. And then I also attended zoning and variance and planning and development, and to get more of an idea if you're interested and might want to hear what planning and development does, and or like me, just because.
Brittany Bolton, District 5. I noted to folks who are close and so just be mindful of that as you're near the mic. The mic is on the camera. Block and out blocking their dogs. So still trying to figure out over. So we'll get that out on social media.
The annual festival is back. All of this was a great success. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend, neither could Beth. All the accounts were. It was a great deal of fun, even though it rained. That occurred almost 2 weeks ago on rules. And certainly we reached out to the police and let them to kind of support the people who were. And then a few days later, I want to say it was a testament to Enola, who is a very private person. So it was a sad event, and it could have been a really tragic thing or something really awful if that hadn't been their private life, and how that estate gets handled will be kind of problematic. To just speak back a little bit on Commissioner Waddell's, I think the direction that the bikeway is heading of leading the project now, and I think in reality, along both neighborhoods, I think will be very supportive. I think it might have been a little bit lumpy how we got there, but we'll end up, I think.
There are just a few things that I want to mention. There have been a lot of reports lately of car thefts near Morrison and Enola. DJ's is officially demoed, and we'll see how that comes. If anybody wants to get their chicken or oil changed, they'll soon be able to get there too. I keep checking out to see if anyone is slated to come there. Right now it's just speculative tenants. And there were several blocks, Jeffrey, Royal Forest, and Beachwald, the light at Morrison High. So this is something where you'll just be out in your front yard, and a car will go by 35, 40 miles an hour. The streets are very narrow, so it's something that people are worried about. I have a few signs left that were slow down signs, but that is all.
Welcome everybody, I'm BJ White. I proudly represent District 9, and I have a couple of items. The real estate developer for the Aldi, that District 9 is enthusiastically awaiting for their grand opening. They are having a soft open on October 18th. And the advertised grand opening is October 27th. Trick or treat, Aldi in Clintonville has arrived. So that's some good news for the neighborhood. Very, very excited to share. With that being said, since I have been an area commissioner, and now I'm upon my completing my 6th year, I noticed that the Welcome to Clintonville signs are misplaced. So when you're going southbound from Worthington and you see the Welcome to Clintonville sign, it is about a block and a half further south than the Clintonville border begins. And when you're going north, it is 3 blocks. The Welcome to Worthington sign is 3 blocks south of the Worthington border. And so I finally mustered up the courage, at the risk of sounding like I'm playing a game of Risk, to ask them to move their signs. And I've been in contact with the Worthington City Manager, Councilmember Dorans, and our right-of-way manager to get the signage placed where it should be placed. So I'm encouraged by the interaction so far. I continue to have complaints about deer, and if you want to see a very effective tool in fending off the deer, I would defer to, Kari, don't shake your head. I would defer you to look at my Clintonville Area Commissioner page on Facebook for a video that shows it. And household ammonia, and you dip the tampons in the household ammonia. You remove the applicator, and then you tie the string to a tree branch or to a fence, and the deer are disgusted by it. So they just cover people so nobody will bother your ornamental shrubs any longer.
You need to decorate the tampon.
For the time being.
So far, so good.
Does it wear off?
No. So the deer repellent that you would buy at like Beechwood Hardware, and they have a whole aisle of stuff, but you have to keep reapplying it. Now, if you've ever been put in a position where you've bought an old house and you're trying to clean up the cat urine odor, that stuff does not wash out. That ammonia lingers, which is where I got my stroke of brilliance. So the ammonia does not wash away. And you can reapply ammonia. Just take the tampon and re-dip it in your jar of ammonia and be on with your day. So, good question, Commissioner White.
Tough to follow that, right?
So, I also met with Bill Hadler of the Hadler Companies to talk about something he has in the works for the old Acor Reservation Office at the corner of High Street and Sunnyside Lane. He's got some prospective tenants that want to take over that space, and we also continue to have a conversation for the vacant lot that has had nothing in it for some time. So we continue to have a very warm rapport, and I'm very hopeful that the Hadler Companies will procure a tenant for both of those places very soon. As District 9's area commissioner, I just want to reaffirm my role with the following recitations. And I want to cite the Clintonville Area Commission's homepage. I am committed to the undertaking of the preservation of the values, of the community for promotion, implementation, and recommendations to city officials. The COC was empowered in 1974 by the City Columbus Charter to represent the Clintonville community in the discussion of community concerns. By city code, the purpose of the CAC is to afford additional voluntary citizen participation in the decision-making in an advisory capacity and facilitate communications, understanding and cooperation between neighborhood groups, city officials, and developers. Citing my own letter of appointment from the mayor's office, I understand my role as follows. As a member of the Clintonville Area Commission, you will serve in an advisory role to City Council in a legislative and policy matters. Area commissioners are the pillars of our neighborhood. We rely upon you and your fellow commissioners to be additional eyes and ears in our communities. Area commissions and their unique relationships with City Council and the administration are one of the elements that make the City of Columbus so exceptional. And I also want to cite the preface to the Clintonville area bylaws. These bylaws shall establish the order of procedures under the Clintonville Area Commission. The CAC shall execute their duties and functions set forth in and with the authority granted under the Chapter 3109 of the Columbus City Code. The Commission shall not endorse any candidate for public office. I will continue to serve in a diplomatic fashion under all of that understanding that is committed to that letter of appointment from the mayor's office, advocating on behalf of the wonderful people of District 9 until the end of my third-year term. I will continue to cooperate with the city officials as I am expected to do for the desired outcomes of my neighborhood. And that is all I have.
Brian Pickford, District 2, 3 updates. First update, maybe something for Libby too, can touch base. There was a deer that was, or it looked like it was a big buck. I don't know how to count horns, but it definitely had, or antlers, but definitely had a lot of antlers. So that's one thing. Had a nice conversation with Project Blueprint. One of my 2 key takeaways that I got from the meeting with them is that for lateral linings, there is an absolute cost limit per house that they'd be able to handle for the lateral lining. So I know the goal, they have in there that they'd be able to do it, but if they have to go into the street, if they have to tear out part of the yard or go into like some type of foundation or into a garage area, obviously that would probably be in itself limiting, but there is a cost limit available to that. They didn't have an exact number, but just know that while you may be eligible for a lateral line, especially if you have a lot of problems with tree roots, there might be limitations, especially when they need to get into that area and do that. So more to come on that. Hopefully they'll have a budget soon, but I think that could be limiting. And so didn't really get into details that of like asking, well, what if you partnered with the city to help cover the cost, but just know that there's a limit there. The other thing, had a discussion with Project Blueprint, is I think they are reevaluating some pumps. So previously you were denied because you had a sump up or it wasn't malfunction. I think they're actually going back and reevaluating that. I don't have all the details there, but something that maybe follow up on. If you had a sump pump, we're told no, you couldn't get one, then you might be eligible for it. And then the final update is the North Broadway Bridge. So that bridge is actually owned by the Franklin County Board of Engineers. I was not able to attend the meeting, but I did get a notification in the actual mail by letter on August 23rd that there was a meeting about an update to the bridge. And so one of the requests was, can we make that bridge more pedestrian friendly on the south side? And so my takeaways from the meeting that I can't see has been posted, but what I saw other people's posts on Facebook is it looks like they are making that more of a protected corridor on that bridge, which is what we requested. So more to come. Hopefully we'll have information next meeting where we can actually pull what's available on the website, but wanted to share that too, so that would be good for District 2 and just that east-west traffic on that problem.
Mike Wyman, District 7, nothing to report.
Next, we have consideration of prior meeting minutes. Commissioner Harrison.
I think that we, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we have 2 meeting minutes to approve. Does that seem correct? Yes. Okay. So the special meeting minutes from prepared by Commissioner Bolton. Is there a motion to approve those, or are there any objections?
I'll move to approve. That's fine.
I will make a note that I have one small edit from Commissioner Mozio that I included, so I'll send you the most updated version.
And I think Commissioner Bolton will make a short presentation on it later in the agenda, so I'll leave that where it's at. So, we do move.
I did.
Second?
I was gonna abstain, I was not that session.
Second. All those, voice vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Any abstaining?
And the August meeting minutes, from Commissioner Letterill. And by the way, thank you everyone for covering me while I was gone. Appreciate it. Did everyone have a chance to review those, or any oppositions to approval? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any additions or changes to the minutes? Then all those in favor of approving the agenda, the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Great. Thank you very much. Next.
Yes, I have not done any payments since last month. The only payment year, fiscal year to date is $116 stamp purchase reimbursement to our zoning and variance chair, Stephen Hardwick, for $116. And we do have our CAC annual post office box renewal come up, which I will need to make a payment of $202. And that brings our balance down to, it's kind of weird because we didn't start out with $2,500. It was $2,500 and some change. But I'll go ahead and I'll give you the actual bank ledger balance is now $2,483.04. But it really should be, for a matter of the minutes, and 202, 318, 230, 318. I don't know why I did that. 2,500 minus 313, right? 18, sorry. $2,182. Is that right? Yeah. $2,182 left in our budget, but the ledger balance says we have $2,483.04. That's what we have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bolton, could you provide us a little summary of the August special meeting? There were a lot of people here who.
Our special meeting on August 9th, if you would like to watch it in more detail and you weren't there that day, that is on Channel Clintonville on YouTube. We had great attendance. 6 out of our 9 commissioners were able to attend, and I apologize to Green Spot. I was the manager of that doodle poll, and it ended up the same night as the fire station walkthrough at Station 19. So there's some really great materials that Ryan Koshy and Anna Kern put together, the co-chairs of Green Spot, to highlight that walkthrough as well, that are available. We can get online too. The reason for the special meeting was really to discuss UIRF funding, city capital budget processes, and how all of these things interact with one another, and discuss our priorities as commissioners and what we've heard from our constituents as to capital needs in the community. I'll note, unrelated to the capital spending, we also did cancel the August 27th election because all of our 3 open races were uncontested. So that was the only action item that came out of the meeting. We had a great, commentary from Chairman Overbeck, Andrew Overbeck of the Planning and Development Committee, who explained, the differences between UIRF funds, which are typically smaller, and we have, language that allows us to advise on those spending spending those UIRF funds, as opposed to the capital budget, which tends to be something that we have less of an input in, and we kind of talked about, how we feel about that moving forward. Some general themes that emerged were the need for more 360 feedback, for us to be more proactive about getting information from the city on the progress of our recommendations. We also all kind of unanimously seem to agree that we desperately need some more community space for meetings. Obviously, we appreciate this room, but we want to have more places that we can gather as a community. we want to leverage initiatives that are already being funded to better support one another. So one great example that Commissioner White had was the concept of playgrounds that could be from youth to adults, and having that interface with ADA compliance and senior services. Also some support for more general funding for parks and rec facilities. Some very specific projects, or not projects, but things that we need to consider brought up, like the inaccessibility of Glen Echo Park, quiet zones around the railroad and some jurisdictional issues around that, the former utility building at Oakland Park in Indianola. And then Chairman Overbeck also kind of highlighted the main 4 themes that have emerged from the community surveys are sidewalk improvements, traffic calming, bike infrastructure, and streetscaping. We had a mention of the need for public parking as well, to be able to draw in visitors from outside of our neighborhood, and talked about the possibilities of exploring better use of shared use agreements between some of our local businesses and parking space owners. We had some great robust public comment, including from all of our 3 incoming area commissioners, so thank you for attending. There was comment around doing more to attract developers to our neighborhood. We want more civic organizations to step up and do some leadership, not just the area commission, and bury the power lines, concerns around speeding, walkability, and biking. So kind of big next step action item. Council member Liz Brown has been very proactive about trying to gain community feedback from residents and area commissions on the capital budget. So one of our kind of next steps was for us as an area commission to reach out to her directly and ask her how we can best provide that feedback, what that platform looks like, and how we can be most impactful. So if anybody has anything I missed that they wanted to highlight from that meeting, feel free to chime in.
No, the one thing I would like to ask the commission to do is, we had talked about establishing a process to more regularly provide feedback and input into the UIRF process particularly. And I think we'll look into a way for us to do that so we can satisfy ourselves that we're having input. In the near term though, I don't think projects that any of the members feel would fit in well with the UIRF requests, which tend to gravitate towards public service sorts of improvements, sidewalks, roadway issues or whatever. I would ask you to contribute those, and we can begin with until we have the process, because I think we've already waited long enough. So I'd ask you all to think about those issues. Please email them to me. We can kind of combine them and figure out a way to update that list in the interim with the city. I think that's a way for us to. Thank you. Next on the agenda is a neighborhood update. We can expect a comment.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Okay, I've got 2 things I want to bring up to the commissioners first. The first one is we have, and this is with James White, and this topic is James A. White. If you haven't already taken one of the trainings with him, he's one of my favorite presenters, but I'll say that about everyone. But it's really great. But this topic is going to be about improving engagement and communications by valuing differences. So if you have time, register ahead of time. David Huey did send an email. If you'd like, I can send a reminder. So we can try to get you registered tomorrow.
That's next week.
That is September 10th. Yes, not this weekend, because there's something else on September 3rd that's taking over the city, right? And then the other one I want to remind you of is new area commissioner training. So, which also can be used as a refresher, and I've also sent it over to your zoning chair to invite members of the zoning committee. So that will be on September 14th. So that email also did go out, so that's a good thing to be shared with your new members. We have some new staff working in your area that will be servicing. So we have a new social worker who will be working on the north side. So Kendra, she'll be starting some community hours on the North Pride Center once we kind of get her rolled into that. So if you do have a social work concern, I may be bringing her out. I've been starting to introduce her to some of our agencies in the area and giving her kind of just an overview. And then also community liaison officer. So Officer Patty has taken a different role with police. Okay, we're actually, and so Officer Montgomery, I don't know if the paperwork is finalized, but I do know that if you have community liaison concerns, please let me know and I can forward to him And I know in the meantime, Officer Hammerstein, who helps with the University District, has been really helpful in that, but Officer Montgomery, so I will let him know of your meetings when we, make sure that he's locked.
Is that Vince?
Timothy. So, those, thank you.
We want to welcome Harrison Kosu back from a little hiatus.
Yes.
He's been traveling and missed a couple meetings, but.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I've been traveling. I'm glad to be back. It's been a while. A few highlights from City Council. So, City Council will be back in chambers September 12th, this Monday coming up. And then one thing that we're also highlighting and celebrating is the Latina Hispanic or Heritage Month, which the kickoff will be September 17th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. So I'll make sure once the flyers that come out, I'll share with you guys. And then also Councilmember Lourdes' team, they're also having a beautification grants that they'll be giving out to small organizations who want to beautify their community. So they'll also be having more information on that as far as the process on how to receive the money and how they will be receiving. So more information will come out on that one. And then also the city will also be celebrating the Asian American Month, which will kick off September 27th. That will be happening. And then there's also a policy pitch, which was discussed. I will try to get more information about it. I think some city council members will be seeking more policy driven. I'm going to get more information, but I wrote it down in my notes. And then like Bree said, Council Member Elizabeth Brown's team will be reaching out to pretty much talk to every area commission about the process and try to set up the people how the next steps are. And then also with the area commission training, I don't know if, but I heard they will be paying some money to the people who attend. I don't know if you ever know.
That's not.
That's not. So those are my highlights from City Council. And if you have any questions, I am here for it.
What was that you were just saying?
Thank you very much.
Attendance would be much better.
Yes.
Next on the agenda is the zoning and variance report. Steve Hardwick.
We had two items on our agenda. The first one was from the 3013 to 3021 North High Street. The applicant seeks to build a mixed-use multifamily building. They want variances to reduce the required parking spaces from 95 to 28 for residential use and no for restaurant use. And also, they want for parking lot screening to allow the required parking lot screening on the west edge of the property to not include the full 4-foot buffer. The main, in the past, last time they came before our committee, and they didn't make it to the commission, they tabled it at the committee level. So that's why you see on our agenda, we had to take it off the table first. They no longer seek a height variance. They moved back the top floor, and it's explained that there's basically a slant from the street. And so if you move the top floor back, you can go a little bit higher. The main concern was parking. That was the main opposition that came from people at 10 Weber. There's also someone from the homeowner in the Tulane area who has also expressed that concern. There's a parking study that I've sent to you that shows that if you go out a few blocks, there's plenty of parking. Then the question is going out a few blocks, is that appropriate or not? That was what comes back and forth. There's always going to be spaces for people willing to walk a few blocks. They did add 24 inside bike parking on the first floor. I tell you, I get to work either usually by bike or by bus, and I pay $25 a month for indoor secure bike parking, and it is, for someone who's a cyclist, it's a game changer. You don't have to leave it at your apartment, and you don't have to leave it out in the weather. But that, my notes over here. I have sent you a number of comments. We did have someone from the North Linden Commission come in, biked in. I think he was the only one under 30 in the room. And he say that people under 30 are much more likely to live without a car, especially if it's on High Street and they want to work, and they're associated with the university. And the vote on the committee was 5-2 in favor. I'm not going to repeat everything. I know for time I'm not going to read everything on the minutes. And I just told you the main reasons against it and for it. People aren't going to. The idea is that some people were concerned that there's going to be too much use of parking for a restaurant on the first floor because they don't know what it's going to be. Then other people were concerned that the restaurant would fail because people no one would want to go to it because they'd have to walk to it. I'm not sure which one it is. My guess is they won't get a business there that needs more parking than they have. Part of the reason why I voted. I was one of the people who voted yes. Unless you have any other questions for me, questions for me. You had heard the applicant's presentation, but I'd be happy to answer any now.
Any questions for Steve? I'd like to hear from the applicant.
Should I push this chair in the middle of the?
Whatever you want to do, whatever makes you comfortable, and you walk us through.
That's fine. Can you pass out the?
Sure.
And yeah. Hand me the board, please. Passing out information that you probably all received, but I don't know if you have with you and what that, right? I also brought giant oversized versions of, I don't have anything that's not in the packet, but you know, for the purposes of our discussion, this may or may not be useful. Thanks, Gary. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Brian Higgins. My company owns the used car lot at 3021 North High Street. It was a used car lot for many years. It is once again a used car lot, hopefully on a temporary basis, but thought it was a good idea just to have some activity on the site while we go through this process, and completely candidly, it pays the note on the acquisition, right? So, fine. What we're proposing is a 45-unit, 5-story, mixed-use building. It's got a little under 2,000 square feet of commercial space on the ground floor. The ground floor also consists of some common areas. It's where you'll find package room, mail room, the aforementioned indoor bike storage, trash, that kind of stuff. We do have outdoor bike storage as well, in case we end up with visitors who bike there, or people who, if we take up all the spaces on the indoor bike facilities. So that's worth noting. We do have, as was mentioned, 28 surface parking spaces. Of those 45 units, 2 are 2 bedrooms, 3 are studios, the rest are conventional 1 bedrooms. We have, at the request of the city, gone through and hired they recommended a number of firms. Essentially, we're engineers, so we had both a traffic and a parking study done. Our only direct involvement was engaging when a contract and paying them. So we were at no point in time got to steer the process or So they did select. I guess the easier one to digest perhaps is the traffic study, and so they analyzed traffic flow on the site. And so at earlier incarnations of the site, we actually had more surface parking, but due to the desire to have storage capacity on the egress area that takes you to High Street, we lost a few spaces there. We did lose a few spaces too. There is a sewer easement that runs along that egress area, and so we cannot create any parking there as we do have in the sort of western edge of the site. We lost a few spaces there. So we went from 30 5 or something like that, earlier incarnations of this plan down to the 28 that you see here. The city also recommended that we add a 4th traffic signal at the intersection of Weber and High, which makes a lot of sense to me. We'll also do some upgrades to the handicap ramps and crosswalks as a result of this. We will also be enhancing some of the infrastructure. I've heard from a number of neighbors. There are some issues, I think, that relate to the sewer when you have, I think there's a capacity issue in the combined sewers. So when you have excessive stormwater, you get a little backing up of sewage and some smell. So we're going to be, again, the city identified this issue some time ago and was waiting for someone to come along and propose a development that would allow them to sort of pass that on to us, which is fine. So we will make that upgrade as well. The parking study is, again, I'm not a traffic or parking engineer, so I defer to the experts. And what they did was take a look, of course, where the site is, and draw a polygon around the location and said, this is where we think people are likely to walk. We think it's not onerous on pedestrians. And it's 2 or 3 blocks depending on direction, topography, all that kind of stuff. And then they went and I think they literally sit there and track on-street parking at various times of day, various days of the week and they also do an analysis of maximum capacity. So in their study area, I believe the capacity was 250 on-street parking spaces. And so at different times of day, there's anywhere from 200 to 150-ish available, rounding the numbers. They're all in the traffic report that we all have access to. So essentially, their analysis was that, we are seeking a parking variance, but that there is adequate on-street parking to absorb, any of the residents or the commercial space users. As Stephen mentioned, we do not know who the commercial users will be. And so the zoning variance we're requesting is an assumption that it is the maximum possible variance, which would be for our restaurant use, which is, as I recall, one parking space for every 75 square feet of floor area. And so obviously if we had I keep using insurance sales as an example, like any kind of office use or other, that doesn't generate a ton of traffic, those requirements change. Obviously, the one thing that's consistent is the current zoning code for residential uses, and it suggests that in a multifamily scenario such as this, you should have 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit. These are mostly 1-bedroom units, and it's been my experience that in other properties that we've built and leased, most people tend to live alone. There are some, for example, we have a property in Franklinton, it's 45 units. I have 2 of those units that are double occupied. One is in a 2-bedroom, the other is in a 1-bedroom. It's just a couple who, whatever economic reasons, I suppose, are sharing a 1-bedroom. So, you never can tell how it'll flush out down the road, but nevertheless, I do know that the city too is reevaluating its entire zoning code, and part of that is it's how it addresses parking, both in a residential and a commercial capacity. Let's just, I think a lot of the concern was sort of worst case scenario, and that was, hey, let's assume you have a restaurant or a bar or something that would generate a lot of traffic. How is that going to work? I don't know that that's what we'll attract in terms of a user, but if we did, I hope a bunch of different things happen. One, I hope people, Clintonville, especially this part of Clintonville, is a very walkable community. I hope that residents who live within the vicinity will come there. I hope people will bike there. I hope people maybe will go to other establishments on the corridor and maybe walk there from here, So there's a sort of multi-stop experience people might have. the other hand, too, I have a little bit of a much younger version of me once worked in the restaurant and bar industry. Unrecognizable to you today. But I do know that your back of the house in a restaurant is probably about half this space. You think about a kitchen, a full service kitchen, storage. We don't have a basement where people can stick other, items, extra flatware, or, that kind of stuff. So probably chew up about half that space in kitchen and storage. So now we're talking about 1,000 square feet, which is not particularly big, and I suppose you could jam a fair amount, and the fire marshal will dictate exactly how many. But I don't know that it's quite as challenging in terms of the overall number of trips generated or people who can actually be in this space at one time. So, for what it's worth, I don't want to get too caught up in the speculation and tenant game, but I can honestly say I don't know who that tenant is. I just hope it's a good tenant that benefits the community in some capacity. I know we went through different versions of this. First time we really went to the zoning committee was in COVID. And so we were very reluctant. Everybody was saying, oh, it's going to take 10 years for a retailer to come back. And I thought, oh my God, So we initially proposed some residential units on the ground floor. We got some comments that was inconsistent with the tenor of the community. And then frankly, as COVID went on too, we thought, it seems like people may be over, a little chicken little, right? So that's hence the conversion of that space. And it's not, as we said, it's under 2,000 square feet. So it's not like it's a tremendous amount of space that needs to be absorbed into the community anyway. But yeah, those are I don't want to overly dwell and answer questions maybe you don't have on various topics. So I think I've hit the highlights. So maybe I'd be happy to entertain questions if that's sort of the next stage.
Sure. Other questions from the commission for the applicant?
So there's no exit from the parking lot on the south side?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's basically dead end parking?
Yes.
Okay. And the dumpster?
We're actually going to have private trash service. And so we do this in other properties. What happens is like a small little vehicle comes a couple times a week, and we have they're like 60-gallon containers, a couple of them on each floor.
Okay.
And they come and they take them down the elevator and they dump them out, and they do one for recycling and then regular trash, and they do that. And I like the way it works. Dumpsters can attract rats. People bring their trash through the elevator and it drips garbage juice, and I just like there's also so many things that can go wrong. We figured a long time ago, let's just remove as much of the human equation as we can from that process.
So the trash cans are out in the hallway, and they take
They're in little rooms, yeah.
Oh, in a room, okay,
Yeah.
so they take it to a room, dump their stuff in it.
Correct. And we ventilate the rooms so that,
Yeah.
they're overly stinky.
I was able to tour one of his buildings down on Broad Street, and so I do remember seeing something like that, and I didn't think about that, so
Commissioner Boyd.
So it's a total of 45 units.
Yes.
And you have proposed parking of 28. And with that, with the setback, with it sitting right on Front Street, I can, I like how it's situated right on Front Street. On the front of, merging words here on High Street. I like everything about that. And I think that a lot of people who seek housing, and I'm just speaking from personal experience of being a real estate agent for 17 years, I know that a lot of people who seek housing, whether they're condos or apartments or single family homes, they seek close to High Street, close to public transit. And what comes to mind are those people who don't necessarily own cars or don't own or don't need to drive. I know that I've attended a couple of consortiums with the Ohio State School for the Blind and the Ohio State School for the Deaf, and they talk about a need for housing for their students who graduate, who want to remain in the area, to continue to work in the area, where they're very familiar with the infrastructure, they're very familiar with the commerce, and many of them do not drive. And the constant things that I've heard of, and I've attended 3 of their stakeholders events, is there's just, when they move from the dorms, there's no place comparable for them to live safely and to live abundantly. And that's a big concern to people. We need housing that hugs that High Street corridor where people can access public transit easily. So I'm curious to learn, in filling those housing units, will you give priority to those who don't have vehicles or have a need for a vehicle? Will you give priority to those with veteran status? Will you give those people seeking housing units with ADA requirements? Will you seek out those people, 55 and older? Well, tell me a little bit about how you plan to market those housing units.
I think your points are well taken. So being on the High Street, especially this part of the High Street corridor, we're well served by transportation, by public transportation, by Coco bikes. We have walkability to many amenities, including 3 and 4 grocery stores. And so this is part of what made the site certainly attractive to us. And I've actually, I do work with some special need populations who, and it's something that I've heard irrespective of the special need, right? So like access to jobs in an area where, there also can be basic living needs, right? Because a lot of job centers, as we sort of decentralized the way we build cities, you can't always have those things in close proximity to one another. So I would love to find ways to work with those populations, provided that I'm not in violation of any fair housing, which of course is the priority legally. So, I think the site is readily apparent and will be appealing to people who live in the orbit of Ohio State, people who live in the orbit of downtown, who maybe want to even live, anyone along the spine of the High Street corridor because of the transit proximity. And then, for those with cars, obviously they have perhaps more easier free range of motion. But I would love to learn more, maybe offline, about some of your relationships and how we could work with those different groups.
I think you have a whole pipeline of tenants that are just chomping at the bit, and you would have empty parking spaces. So one more question that I have that comes to mind is, will there be any more LEED certified or Greenville design to this property aside from your bicycle park?
We have done, the building actually that we referred to is LEED Gold. Yeah. So we definitely have a history of doing that in the past. I think what we have learned is that it's an awful lot of heavy lifting for a magic piece of paper. So there are things we like to incorporate though. So as a matter of course, right? So Maria is a project architect, and we were talking about this just I guess it was yesterday. How can we in our standard design just incorporate things that are green? So when we think about toilets, we want to make sure we have at least a 1.28 gallon per flush or less. Now, how can we do better? When we think about gallons per minute of our faucets, we make sure we can meet some of these guidelines. Can we incorporate universal design? Now, some of our units are going to be ADA compliant, and that's fine. But even in our standard units, I think universal design is compelling. In simple things you might not even think about, like having levers instead of doorknobs. If you're coming home, you're schlepping in a bunch of groceries. It's so much easier to kind of elbow, open those doors, and those are practical things that also happen to speak to some of those issues. So obviously we would use like no volatile organic compounds in our paints and in our caulk and the different things like that. So we incorporate green things, although I just don't know that I can rationalize the expenditure of LEED certification, especially in this crazy environment where, you know, we're living in sort of an inflationary time, construction costs, labor challenges.
Well,
So I'm happy to detail, again, you know, even outside of this forum, the things we'll do, because I think they're important, but yeah.
I just thought I would make that
Oh,
a
sure.
question, since you are hugging the ravine, and some people may have questions about, the environmental safety of the ravine, and I thought, well, you know, you know, I just thought I'd put that out there, but I love the trash idea. Something that I wanna mention is that you say you have 48 units, right? 45 units. I'd like to just show you in District 9, on High Street between West Canal Avenue and Roslyn Avenue, we have a 38 unit building, and at the time that it's Worthington Towers, and that's a 5-story building, and at the time that this building was constructed, I don't think that they really, it was in Sharon Township. It was before this area was incorporated into the city of Columbus. And if everybody knows that story, District 9 was acquired by the city of Columbus to raise real estate tax revenue to fund infrastructure. And then Graceland Boulevard, Graceland Shopping Center got developed, and they began bypassing what was US 23 and created High Street. So District 9 says you're welcome. Anyway, but prior to it being incorporated in the city of Columbus, where there was zoning, this was Sharon Township, and this sits right on High Street, and it has 38 units. And there isn't a lot of parking for that too. And there's a little sweep in that moves in from High Street. So it doesn't sit right on High Street, and there are a lot, and there's a bus stop right out front. And I see a lot of the people who come out of this building and go to the bus stop. So I know that this is very popular for people who use the bus to commute. And I think that this is even a higher structure than what yours is. And there is not mixed use. This is all 100% residential. So I just want you to feel encouraged that these buildings do exist and they do work out well, in spite of some of the fears that may be expressed by the community.
I appreciate that.
That's all.
Any other questions?
Just had a quick question about the loading zone. That looks like in the drawing it's one spot, is that correct? And is that an existing spot that is there today that would be taken up by that?
So, excellent point. Right now, there are 2 curb cuts into the existing used car lot. And so we are really kind of eliminating both and making one more focused on the internal traffic of the site. So what that ends up being, we are adding a space, as you indicate, for called a loading space, I guess, on High Street. And what we envision that being is whether it's move-ins, which I know are relatively infrequent. I feel like it's a lot easier to pull a U-Haul up on High Street than it is maybe to navigate the internal parking. But also, every time you get an Amazon delivery, every time you get a food app delivery, that they can utilize that loading space. And then there is one new space on High Street that we are adding, and then the rest are just existing space. So it's a net gain of one space, including setting aside the loading area.
What's the square footage of the studios and the bedrooms?
Gosh, there are a whole variety of different spaces, approximately. Maria, will you help me out? What's the approximate square footage? I want to say the one bedrooms are like 650 to 680.
That sounds right, yeah. The 2 bedrooms are 950 to 1,000.
What about the studios?
They're on.
Yeah,
they're
they're
marked
all
here.
on.
It's on the plan.
They vary, but you need to see like.
What's a studio?
Yeah. So there's a 742.
Studios are
560.
there you go, upper fives. Yeah.
Upper five. And what's the width of the sidewalk from High Street from, walkable space, let's say? Let's say where the building comes out the furthest.
That would be on the northern
Yeah.
edge there.
Yeah.
We do have a little bit of a setback beyond what is currently the sidewalk. I think it's an additional, Maria, what would you ballpark that be?
Like
Where is it located?
the ad.
We want people to draw their eyes to create that sitting area.
Just a quick question. Is it Juliet that?
Walk out on,
All right.
literally, where far?
Is it Juliet that?
Walk out on,
All right.
literally, where far out though?
Yes, I've heard the term, but I wasn't.
You can see them
The High Street elevation has them.
where most of them live. They're the center. I should mention too, there is a rooftop amenity for people. There you go. Yeah, up there in. There you go. Yeah, up there in. It's not huge, but it's a nice place. Decent views. You know, I wish one of these days parking will be available for a fee, but will be assigned as well. So parking will be available for a fee, but will be assigned as well. So, assuming that we have greater demand and after we've assigned all the parking spaces, then they would park, in the community per the guidelines in the parking plan.
A lot about it, so forgive me. But I think that one of the interesting things is obvious that you have so many parking spaces, but you have so many apartments. So first of all, I did want to say, Blow Smoke, saying that instead, I think that's the big thing about and what people are up against in terms of deciding. Of course, those people are going to complain. It goes on down the road, but I think that it's a very interesting. First time that this is going to come up. I know that on this intersection, there's hands trying to get down there because people come down Weber and got hit 3 times. But signaling there, do you have any information on how they might propose to change signaling relative to this development?
And how they figure out the timing and length of that, I do not know.
I think in your traffic study, pedestrian activity on that intersection, so I think that's part of what was factored in. So
There's a formula, and they try to time out. I'm sure with the other lights on High Street, Ohio State as quickly as possible.
I do want to thank you for bringing that's the way that they need to do that.
Yeah,
That's
the paper itself is like, setting aside the actual physical improvements of the building, the paper itself is like 50 grand.
Yeah.
There were a lot of magic papers. I learned a lot.
That's all I have.
I'd like to your credit, I think you've done a very effective study, and I think you've got our feedback, our opinions. You've responded to some of that, not all of what transportation department, public service, all these departments. This is very active. Got through all those hurdles. So what you've arrived at here, I think, is a complex little building. It's difficult. You've got to park underneath some of. There's all sorts of services and stuff like that. They're all massed in this tiny little space. But the plan works. And I think in terms of how you've approached the parking, I'm going to commend you with the parking work out well, just as much as the community does. So that's a shared risk that both of us are taking together with you. Your tenants are kind of complaining about, or you're having difficulty managing. You're going to make it easy on yourself when you consider those first 4 tenants, and you'll probably go for that insurance broker over the restaurant, just to manage your own impact and make your building as approval for sort of the most intensive use. And I think it would be maybe the more interesting use, right? If you had a little coffee shop or whatever it is. I don't imagine that a space this small would have much of an impact. Pizza shop in my neighborhood, Gatos. They just moved to the old Wildflower location. Okay, when they picked up and moved, another restaurant has since moved in there, and again, the restaurant, the parking didn't change. Now, but the next potentially, is that kind of flexible space. So I think your approach to parking, I think your understanding that this is nice, so I'm aware that, the neighborhood residents that live here at University who have foregone the ask is a little deeper than I wish. It more than offsets whatever, shortcomings that might have. Eager to see this happen. Are there any questions from the public or comments from the public?
So you've got a 2,000 square foot space that's supposed to allow for a tenant. So are available for a tenant to actually put in there for like ventilation and HVAC.
There is a shaft to accommodate ventilation of the intensity of that restaurant use. That's to make it as flexible as possible, flexible as you can.
My name's Pete Shelby. I'm a mom and pop landlord. If you keep overdeveloping Clintonville, I can very permit parking like the short north. During the, I was parked in front, but since then, Harvest marijuana shoppers opened up. I'll call them the kitchens opened up. They'll guarantee it. We'll have permit parking sooner rather than later in Clintonville. Up the neighborhood with parking variance after parking variance.
Any other comments from the public? I saw a hand.
Going for a different variance where there's.
I'm not even sure how many different iterations of
Right.
the western edge backs into the ravine. At one point in time, the western, it's where all those trees are, and we even looked at a kind of come in underneath there and create a layer of subterranean parking. And they had, so, it was essentially building isn't all that big. You lose a lot of real estate in circulation for them. And so it was, the sort of above ground ramp, just you build a speed ramp that comes in quickly and it gets you maybe to an elevated layer. There's like a half parking deck, or they're similar when it grows. So we did look at different options and just we couldn't figure out a way to make them effectively work.
Okay, now permit parking. It's my understanding, since we've been talking about parking with restricted parking on consideration. And then the other thing is what I believe, but then what was happening, and that's since sold the parking variance. Does that parking variance?
Correct.
Thank you, Steve. That to us, because we voted on that.
BZA. This isn't a council.
Actually, I think good question. Do you know how the parking studies take into consideration?
A 10-year window, and I think there's even a larger window where they said, okay, at this point, I think it was the furthest out or whatever that said it gets to upgrade.
Like any audit is to predict any.
The only reason I bring up is shopping district, I believe the board plus hotel side is only going to be a parking lot, so I don't think we get to vote on it or have any action.
Like on our side.
Gotcha.
Right, and so since the was still, okay.
Different project.
Yeah, everything happened in
But I think
10 years is different than immediate.
Citywide, and it's increased a certain rate and that kind of stuff.
Be correctly that in all fairness size that were Brooklyn, New York, but my experience property, they're not going to 3 years.
I find because then people will hold you to that. As soon
Are you taking out, how many are you putting?
have any trees, so there are trees that you see in the ravine area. We're not touching at all. Technically, some of them maybe, but they're on the. I think we have a net add of trees, don't we?
8 trees.
8 trees.
Facing west. It's a jungle.
There is other than the existing trees, is facing west. We'll have to try to mitigate.
No financial.
Cheryl, thank you very much.
Brian, is that
That's the hot seat. On to the next one.
60-day waiting period for demolition, but what happened is the city sent us sent the agenda two days before our meeting to the applicant, a Mirage application. And on Tuesday, 2 days ago, I sent another email saying, well, the committee recommended approving this unanimously because the whole purpose is to make sure that I'm not missing anything, and she didn't see anything historical. So on Tuesday, I strongly recommended if they wanted the waiver, that they should. And I said, in case you have questions, you may have questions, and they're not, so whether they need it or not. But it's certainly within your discretion to say they didn't show up.
The reason that their absence would disqualify them. The motion questions from the commission that Stephen could answer.
Someone went up and looked at there, like, there's some fenced off there.
Not like the full building.
Correct.
But
Yeah,
I
part of
haven't looked at it.
It's almost 6.
Yeah, that's your.
What did you say? And is Alta staying? I mean, please God, I was that side of the shopping center. And is it gonna?
But if your vote depends on knowing the answer.
If they're changing. Are there any questions from the public about the demolition application? Demolition application waiting period be waived. Commissioner Motil. Commissioner Garrison. Yes. Commissioner White.
Yes. Need to talk to us and Eddie. No, and I'm not. Yeah. Because they actually.
Sorry. It was lowendick.com, I think.
Next we have a presentation.
We could both stand here. How about that? Hi everybody, I'm Arthur Willis. We've got, I think, 10 or 11 slides, so we were asked to give a word. Columbus citywide planning policies. We start about 1 million people in central areas of the growth. Everybody knows that. So that's our background. Maybe 5 years back, we realized we haven't had a comprehensive. Our oldest is 1994. They really stemmed out of the comprehensive plan. You all have your route. And these plans provide land use recommendations. They provide rezoning and variances. And we use them every time. A lot of times folks think they aren't as strong as they could be, and other people think that they're weak. Our background, we work with them. They're serving us in many ways. But here, so we formed this. It's the 1993 plan. There's guiding principles that have fully adopted C2P2, and it's a land use. If we did the Clintonville guide, the development of that plan, then gain access to the design guidelines. It provides consider the design guidelines best practice. We did a lot of national confident in. It provides a mechanism for a citywide update, and every time we would do a this is land use and design. It includes the guiding principles. I look at it, I read it now, and it's like no brainer, So a healthy and complete communicable element for the health options. We needed to say that, out. It'll continue to grow out. It's going to grow out in instead of it going out, and then it should be as sustainable as it can be. We need to be working, we're one tree at a time. Developments should have high quality, a well-designed storefront or towards transit, so forth, so on. So these are the system. This is what it is. These are the main categories then planned. The design guidelines, again, they then address. There's so much more recognition of the importance of design guidelines and develop things. You all know this. The world's going to end. The business will fail. The business, the importance of guidelines are actually. Early for Clintonville, doing actual updates to land use plans. Record C2P2. We bring the broad it's adopted. Clintonville plan and the stricter one applies. The other, we use both. In communities, design guidelines. So it was a really quick.
I just wanted to thank you. I know that I held monthly meetings in my district, and you presented, you and everybody else presented. And with my district, and what I stumble with is being able to lend in. For example, my district has 11 automotive industries.
Right.
That commercial business, and it's a whole different ball of wax than what I'm accustomed to in residential real estate. How do you then property to say of development in this neighborhood?
Right. Specifically, it's really more of a land use question versus a design question. And Alex is aware of, we develop land, broad recommended neighborhood to use. it's tricky because in so many cases, but if the development limit the proliferation of that use, it's a challenging topic. Land use planning now is you want to stay tuned on zoning code update.
And just so you know, there are some developers out there who do this on their own accord already. I meet with Bill Padler, potential tenant. If it's a fast food restaurant or an automotive, I run it by you first. And I said,
That's
thanks.
cool.
I said, thanks, Bill. I appreciate it.
You know, I mean, there are examples of gas stations now that are built up to the same where a lot of uses are just asphalt that turns into a sidewalk and it turns into a road, at least fencing. I mean, it is an improvement.
Community commercial overlay. Next
is just global, you know, C2P2, but like make sure that the building is, you know, urban commercial guidelines, like, you know, it maybe not a particular, you do, there's that, but there is beyond that. It could be if there's an upper story and we're talking about upper story setbacks, or, you know, if the planning committee wanted to, you know, sit down and we can specifics on it. My gut reaction is that existing plan and through the overlays. That being said, we encourage early adoption because it's
two plans, and comparing design guidelines and principles and all that. There's a lot of alignment for sure in a lot of ways, and not only in its current form, but essentially. So that gives it in the future as well. Has a lot more to say about multifamily housing, which allows us.
And that's a really good point that Alex said, because you know, we anticipate the zoning code update coming forward, and we didn't want to be engaging neighborhoods on both at the same time because there's so many communities to adopt C2P2, and it is designed such that every so many standard, we're going to add it, we're going to adopt it citywide, and therefore it keeps your plan alive over time. The zoning code update is going to be where the action is in the near future. But we're going to say
we didn't mean to not adopt to improve what we already had, but it was certainly
I saw is the ADA and wheelchair accessibility incorporated into C2P2.
The picture, you know, was really, it's illustrated, it's meant to create land, literally. So our plans address private rights. We'll just talk about the important ways to use those guiding principles to kind of elevate.
Absolutely. And compare it with the C2P2.
Areas are not, we're specifically saying no, absolutely. You know, and I want to, you know, Kevin Wheeler asked me to let you know in the upcoming months, by the way, you're going to be getting out.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, happy to talk more.
We're running out of time.
All right.
Okay. I can wait till next month.
Email it to us, and if
Do it at the beginning.
is there a motion to adjourn?
I'm sorry, I thought the clock was.